Today we're going to talk about why separating PvE and PvP is a bad thing in MMORPGs. Before we get started, I want to quickly qualify myself to talk on this topic, as not everybody is familiar with me, but I am somebody that plays most MMOs at a very high level in both PvE and PvP simultaneously, whereas most people kind of do one or the other. I usually do both and do both at the same time, most notably with WildStar. I was in the rank 1 rating guild in the world, getting all the world firsts while simultaneously being rank 1 in 2v2 and 3v3 arena. I also pulled this off in World of Warcraft briefly for a time. I was one of the top Guardian Druids in raiding while also being top 100 in arenas as a Guardian Druid. That was quite the experience. I feel I have a unique perspective because I am a true MMORPG enjoyer. I play all of the systems, even down to like doing the achievements and looking into the lore. I really get into all aspects of these games, and when you play at the apex of whichever you're doing, PvE or PvP, you will start to notice that people that are in your cohort will lobby for things that are not good for the MMORPG as a whole. And one of these things that World of Warcraft and many other MMOs have just been lobbied into is the complete separation of PvP and PvE. So in this video, I'm going to explain why this is a nightmare and is terrible for MMORPGs, specifically the RPG part of the game. I just don't think it's a good idea to separate these things, so let's get into it. In my perfect MMO, there is a massive cross-pollination between PvP players, PvE players, crafters, and the activities going on in the world as a whole. It needs to be a cycle where everything is just synergistically interacting with each other, and that is just not happening in modern MMOs. So what's the problem? Well, unfortunately, in most modern MMOs, PvP players and PvE players live in their own separate worlds. And I mean that literally. They have no gameplay interactions. Hell, they don't even see each other most of the time. If you're a PvPer in WoW, when do you have a gameplay interaction with a raider? When do you even see a raider? You just don't. You are just flying around Valdrakken, waiting for your 1 hour solo queue shuffle. That's all you're doing. And if you're a PvEer, when do you interact with a PvPer? You don't. You don't even see them. These communities are entirely siloed into their own little mini games. And is that even an MMO? No. It's impossible to feel like you're in a massive multiplayer online world, which is the selling point of these games, when everybody is just in their own siloed systems, not talking to one another, not interacting with one another, and not even seeing each other. It's crazy how far we've come to where MMOs are basically just a collection of mini games. And even if you're not somebody that cares about that synergistic gameplay and like sort of the magic of MMOs, if you're just a very gameplay first person, you just have no incentive. PvP players have no incentive to PvE, and PvE players have no incentive to PvP. Just flat out, there is no advantage or really anything to gain from venturing out of your preferred style of gameplay. The annoying thing is you can't even side grade or supplement your items like you used to be able to. Back in the day, you could do this a little bit, but nowadays, with how powerful the PvP exclusive stats are and how much of that they contribute to the item weight and eye level weight overall, these systems are entirely separate. There is no reason to use PvE gear in PvP and no reason to use PvP gear in PvE because these PvP stats put so much eye level weight to where it makes the PvP gear completely useless in raiding, and the raiding gear doesn't have the PvP exclusive stats, so it's not good against players. And this just leads to a holding pattern where nobody cross-pollinates. Everybody just stays in their lane. Nobody ventures out. The PvPers are not trying the new raids and the new dungeons, and the PvEers sure as hell are not experiencing new PvP metas and new arenas and new battlegrounds. Everybody's just staying right in their lane because there's zero incentive, and it just seems like a waste of time to try out that thing that you don't even do. So what's the solution? Well, unfortunately, this is not going to be popular with the hyper-competitive PvPers and PvEers, but games need to go back to giving players a little bit of a nudge to try out game modes that they might not normally do. You need to get the PvPers in there, PvEing every now and then, the PvEers PvPing. We need to cross-pollinate like we used to back in the day, because honestly, people don't know what they want. And there are a lot of people that convert to the other thing, and they end up becoming raiders because there was that. I've seen this happen a lot with PvPers where they get into raiding because they wanted to get that trinket, and they got that trinket, but it turns out they kind of like it, and they like, the whole parsing and all that stuff. They like that differing gameplay style than just PvP. And then a lot of PvPers come from PvE. So when you have that cross-pollination, just that little nudge helps a lot. And people don't know what they want. Henry Ford famously said, if I asked people what they want, they would have just said they wanted a faster horse. And that's true for video games too. And I think it's especially true for MMOs, because MMOs are a very interconnected thing, where I feel like that having everything interact with each other just leads to a better experience. Another way to look at it is, think about when you were a kid and your parents made you try some food that you didn't want to eat. Maybe it looked weird or smelled weird. Whatever it was, you didn't want to eat it, but your parents were like, you need to at least try it. And sometimes you would try that food and you would like it, and your mind would be blown, and it would just open up all these new possibilities. So that's kind of how you can view PvP and PvE. Now, sometimes you try food and you don't like it. That happens too, and that's fine. But have you ever gotten older and tried something later? You didn't like something as a kid, but now you love it. That's what happens in video games as well. There are sometimes PvEers that only PvE'd, and they get that taste for it, or whatever variable changes to where they love it now. So I think you need to constantly have these systems interact to where you're constantly dipping your toes in the water and trying it. I don't like it. Try it. I don't like it. And occasionally a variable will change, and you'll go from not liking it to potentially loving it. And now you are an entirely new animal. And that would be like broccoli was for me. The first time I had broccoli, cold broccoli, awful. Cold broccoli is horrible. Even to this day, I don't like it. But guess what? You steam it and put some salt and pepper on it. It's nutritionally the same thing. Hardly anything's really changed. But it's the shit. It's awesome. So that's how you need to view MMORPG systems, is that, maybe you're not a big PvE person, but Mythic Plus comes out. These games are constantly evolving and constantly coming up with new systems. So I think just to silo everything into this is PvP only and this is PvE only and that's just how it's going to be, I think is ultimately a waste. These variables are always changing. That steamed broccoli is just one patch away, just one system away. There are raiders, or raiders that really don't like PvP, but guess what? We had solo rated battlegrounds coming out, and I bet you there's going to be a lot of PvEers that enjoy ranked solo BGs, and I bet you there were a ton of PvPers that love Mythic Plus dungeons. These systems are always coming out, and I think you need to nudge people in directions they might not immediately like. However, all of this nudging, as I'm calling it, hinges on one thing. This is the line in the sand that has to be drawn, and that is, you can't get the best gear exclusively from your preferred game mode. That means that to have the full BIS gear for your setup, you need to do both PvP and PvE, and ideally world content and being involved in crafters in some way to have the full synergistic effect. But particularly, you need to do PvE and PvP, both, to get the full BIS. You need to have chase items for both PvPers to chase and PvEers to chase. Oh my gosh, I can hear it now. All of the crying from all of the competitive MMORPG gamers. Does this mean I have to PvP to be competitive in raiding? Does this mean I have to raid if I want to get rank 1? Yes. Yes, it does. If you want to have the best gear in the game, the Apex gear, you need to play the full game. You need to be the best at the full game if you want to have the best stuff. I don't know why we've gotten away from this. I honestly hate esports when it comes to MMORPGs, and this is coming from a guy that likes to raid at the world first level and likes to go for high arena ratings. I like doing all that stuff. But, I mean, what the hell? Oh, at the cost of not playing an MMORPG? No, that's terrible. And the people have voted with their wallets. World of Warcraft was at its peak when there was that cross-pollination and the game wasn't as competitive. Which, what does competitive even mean? Maybe being competitive means you have to be good at all aspects of the game. I don't know why that's not a thing. I don't know why we're judging raiders just based off of rating. I think, honestly, it would be amusing to see, rather than split runs, that for the world first raiding guilds, I would like to see them get in arenas. Wouldn't that be interesting to see Method and all of these guilds, instead of just farming the same piss easy mythics over and over again to split gear, they have to do PvP, or at least some PvP? I think that would be great. And I think it'd be good to get the PvPers back doing PvE stuff too. Have people experiencing the full game. You make all this content, why not have people experience it? It's wild to me. And some people are going to talk about, competitive integrity, which, first of all, MMORPGs are just not great esports. World of Warcraft, ironically enough, had the most viewership. People don't know this, but back in like TBC and Wrath, WoW was a huge esport. It got massive viewership, way higher than it does nowadays, which is kind of ironic because they didn't support it back then, and now they do. But World of Warcraft was at its peak in terms of player base and in terms of like competitive interest when the game was at its least competitive, at least according to, the people that want these systems siloed. So, that's just my opinion on it. I have a very low opinion of killing the RPG part of MMORPGs for competitiveness. I think it's lame as fuck that you kill a dragon and it drops a weapon and it's useless against players. That's just awful. And I don't know. I just think that's dumb. And I think it's dumb that your PvP gear is terrible against, dragons. Like, what the hell? Or what kind of game are we playing? I just can't imagine a world where you get warglaives and they're bad in PvP, or you get your 2200 weapon and it's bad at raiding. Like, what is going on? We're killing the RPG element of the game for fake competitiveness. Now, if you do want to do an esports event, I think that tournament realms are a great way to do it. You can regulate all of the crazy things in the game to the tournament realm where it doesn't kill the RPG main game, because it's probably more than just gear that needs to be regulated. Maybe a few spells are just kind of problematic from an esports perspective, but are really fun in an RPG. So if you want to do a truly competitive, like for money kind of deal, have a tournament realm where you can go and nerf whatever, and it doesn't affect the overall game. But to do it in this weird, like, siloed system thing, I think is just a bad idea, and I think that the player numbers have shown that it's a bad idea. I think people ultimately, they think they do, but they don't. They think it's a good idea to separate all this stuff because they don't have to potentially do a thing they might not like. But guess what? That thing you might not like, you might like it. In conclusion, this problem is not something that happened overnight. This is something that happened through 1,000 concessions, just small little changes here and there where you give this little group something they want and it's not a big deal. And then you give this little group something they want and it's not a big deal. And you give these guys something they want and it's not a big deal. And you just keep doing that for years and years and years. And eventually it's a big deal because now you're not even seeing other players that do PvP or do PvE. Does anyone else feel this way? Because I personally feel like the Wrath of the Lich King model, where you had PvE chase items and PvP chase items, was by far the most healthy. It led to a fun mini game with resilience where you had players kind of rolling the dice a little bit, wearing a little bit more PvE gear to do more damage, but they're squishier. Or they tank it up and put on more PvP gear. And you can also supplement your gear. If you had like a really cool piece of PvE gear that you got early in the season, like it was useful. Or if you had, a high arena rating, got a lot of arena points, it was useful in raiding. Like if you were a high rated PvPer, you got to benefit from that for a long time in raiding. So I just think that if you want to be the best player in an MMORPG in your desired field, you need to be the best at everything. And I think we need to maybe redefine what it means to be good at these games. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe with notifications on. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and join the Discord. It's free.